years ago, the island of Britain was in turmoil. The people of Wales had taken up arms to try to shake off the rule of the English. They'd done so at the urging of one man. His name? Owain Glyndŵr. The revolt led by Owain Glyndŵr almost brought the mighty English state crashing to the ground. No other figure in British history, not even the famous Scot, William Wallace or Braveheart, did more to undermine the integration that led eventually to the United Kingdom. And yet, outside Wales, Owain Glyndŵr isn't very well known, and even within his own country, he's often seen as a kind of Robin Hood figure. Well, our aim in this programme is to put that right. Many of the Welsh think of Glyndŵr as a legendary figure whose spirit lives on. But who was he? And how did he end his days? Many of us are equally intrigued by the secret plans that he and his allies drew up. What exactly did those plans contain? And what impact would they have had on Britain if they'd worked? We're in search of answers to all of these questions. We'll be exploring the mysteries about Glyndŵr the man, and we'll be asking why he did what he did. Why did Glyndŵr embroil the Welsh in a long and bloody war against the English? Why did he wait until he was in his 40s before embarking on his crusade? And why did that rebellion fail? The answers should help us understand a key figure not just in the history of Wales, but in the history of Britain. The last native-born Welshman to bear the title Prince of Wales. Our journey in search of Owain Glyndŵr must start here, in the Dee Valley in northeast Wales, because it's there in the little village of Glyndŵrdwy that he's thought to have been born around the year 1354. The name by which he's known is in fact a shortened form of Owain Glyndŵrdwy, which means Owain of the Glen of the Water of the Dee. The people who live around here are understandably keen to claim Glyndŵr as one of their own. But he's thought to have spent rather more of his time on another of his estates, one that lies some 20 miles south of here, near the border between England and Wales. This beautiful valley was once dominated by a grand manor house owned by Glyndŵr. It was called Sycharth, but the house was destroyed by Glyndŵr's enemies at the height of his revolt. All that remains today, sadly, is the mound on which it once stood. But thanks to a certain poet, we know just what the house looked like and what went on there. Now, the poet in question was Iolo Goch, or Red Iolo, who was a frequent visitor here to Sycharth and wrote at length about the house and the grounds. And he describes for us the little church nearby, and the deer park, and the vineyard, and the watermill, and a huge fish pond, which, by the way, is still tucked away there in the trees even today. Now, as for the house, well, by all accounts, that was pretty impressive, because it had a tiled roof, lots of bedrooms, and as Iolo says in some wonder, several chimneys to convey the smoke away, which was quite a thing in those days. But what impressed Iolo most of all was the lavish hospitality which was always on offer in the house of Owain Glyndŵr, and which of course inspired some of Iolo's best poetry. Hunger, thirst, want and reproach are never known in Sycharth, so said Iolo Goch, making it clear that he'd spent many hours in what he called this Baron's Palace, this mansion of generosity. And he left his readers in no doubt about who deserved the credit for all this luxury, who deserved the thanks for all this culture. Who else but Owain Glyndŵr? Here was a man for whom Iolo had nothing but praise. He went on, A tall, handsome, accomplished gentleman owns this place. Hardy and valiant, the best of Britons. Let's be clear, medieval bards were expected to flatter their patrons, otherwise they wouldn't get a lot of work. But Iolo's praise for Owain is remarkably warm and sincere. And there's a very special reason for that, I think. In English eyes, Owain wasn't particularly important or wealthy or powerful. But in Welsh eyes, his status was altogether different. What made Glyndŵr vitally important to his fellow Welshmen was the quality of his ancestry. Until 70 years or so before his birth, Wales had been ruled by a number of native princes, and Glyndŵr was related to almost all of them.
He was descended from the princely house of Northern Powys, Powys Fadog. His bards claimed also that he was connected to the princely house of Gwynedd and again to the princely house of Deheubarth through his mother. So in a sense he did combine the various princely houses of Wales in his blood.
In the years before Glyndŵr's rebellion, many people in Wales were desperately hoping that he'd make use of his ancestry to try to seize control of the country. They longed for this to happen because of the deep resentment they felt about England's occupation of their land for a century. Edward I of England had conquered Wales at the cost of many lives in the year 1282. He'd cemented his victory by creating a so-called iron ring of castles around the country, and then supplemented this by building a network of fortified towns. By Glyndŵr's day, these towns, Conwy is a good example, had become English outposts within Wales. They were walled communities, dominated by English settlers who treated their Welsh neighbours with contempt. The bards had long predicted the coming of a national saviour, a Mab Darogan, as we say in Welsh, who would free the people from this foreign rule. And they hinted heavily that Owain Glyndŵr was the man they had in mind. But this will surprise many people. Owain Glyndŵr wasn't very enthusiastic.